Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video, in order to look ahead at where Labour are already laying the groundwork for taking the fight to reform UK for the next general election, I'd like to go over the various policies which Labour are already putting in place, how popular we know that they are with the public, but also how likely it is that the public will ever find out about them. Because one of Labour's big problems right now is that the public who approve of many of their policies don't realise that they're underway. So for Labour to get credit for them, how are the public going to find out? But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So there are multiple reasons why Labour are struggling right now. Some forced errors, some unforced errors. Some are just unfortunate timing in that they are actually legislating for a lot of popular moves, but the public are impatient for the change that they were promised and they are unaware that those changes are coming. In fact, some are already here. And that is a communications failure on Labour's part. But I've discussed that before. I will keep doing so. In fact, I'm going to do it again this evening in relation to the Lib Dems. Not in this video. In this video, I'm going to discuss some of the main policies being legislated for this year. And if we assume Labour remain really bad at informing the public, have a look at how likely it is that each one will be noticed by the public in their everyday lives, regardless of whether they get told about them or not. Because if you don't tell the public about something the government have done, the only way they can possibly know is to feel it themselves. So for this exercise, I'm going to pick on 15 features of last year's King's Speech. Now, there were many more policies in it, but 15 of them were polled by YouGov, which gives us a baseline of popularity. In order for Labour to naturally win back support from where it has been lost so far, they're not only going to need to deliver these popular policies, but make sure the public can know about them. And in some cases, I think the public will, in some cases not. And where the public won't notice them, Labour will get absolutely no credit unless their communication seriously improves, which despite recent changes, it still hasn't. So first one is making the bosses of private water companies personally liable for company law breaking. Stunningly popular, 82% in favour to just 9% thinking it's the wrong priority. So will Labour get credit for this? Well, this law is now in place, so they have already delivered it. But I do not think many voters realise. So the only way Labour will get credit for this is if people see the effects. So the only ways for that I see would be if they saw news of water company executives being charged for offences, which I don't expect. I think they're probably going to do their jobs rather than go to prison. The only other way would be if the public noticed improvements in water quality over the next few years, which of course is possible. But if Labour were communicating their moves to the public now, they could be getting not only more credit, but they could get that credit earlier. Next is establishing the Border Security Command to target people smuggling gangs. Now, it's a pointless strategy, can't work, but it's also one that won't be noticed really. Like, how would the public be aware, other than where they're actually operating? You would either need lots of news about people smugglers being arrested by this group that Labour have created, which I think is probably unlikely, or you would need these small boat crossings to stop. But Labour have already acknowledged that their plans will not stop the boats before the next election. So this policy has no chance of gaining them any credit if they're incapable of getting the message to people. And actually, even in this case, even if they did get that message to people, there's a risk it could backfire because voters, Labour may say, oh, we've done this thing. And voters could say, but it hasn't worked. So you're incompetent then. So it might be best if nobody did find out about this one. Third, imposing limits on the sale and marketing of vapes. Hard to see how anyone really notices this one. The policy represents an absence of something that isn't really in people's faces in their everyday lives anyway. Fourth, banning the sale of high caffeine energy drinks to children. This one might be noticed by the parents of children affected. Can't see how it will be noticed by the public at large. Again, it's a sort of an absence of something that's not in your face. But I also doubt it's top of many people's priorities anyway, even if they did notice. Fifth, providing free breakfast clubs in primary schools. This is popular. It will certainly be noticed by parents and teachers at least. Definitely one that will be noticed by people if Labour get the policy right. Now, that's what's key here. The policy has already begun. I think there have been wrangles over whether the budget is enough. But if Labour do get it working, if they do deliver it properly, Yes, people will notice. Of course, if their comms were better, they could also have it noticed by the wider public as well, not just those directly affected. Next, creating GB Energy to invest in renewable energy. Now, this one's tricky. Obviously, if they put up GB Energy boardings everywhere where they're active, all over those communities, it will, of course, be noticed by those local people. Where it provides jobs, it will also be noticed. The main way this one gets noticed nationally is if it reduces energy bills, if they're lower than they were in July 2024 by the next election. So this one has the potential to be noticed, even if Labour comms remains bad. Next is bringing train operators under public ownership. So I'm going to say people aren't going to notice this unless, say, the affected trains get a new paint job to advertise that they're new public ownership. Maybe the publicly owned trains have like publicly owned across them or something. I also don't see costs of train travel really coming down anytime soon. I think the best way for people to notice this one would be if there was a dramatic reduction in cases of trains being cancelled. For example, I'm off to that there London again later this month. I've actually got to go to London multiple times this year. It's an evening thing. I'll be coming back late. That means I have to go to Doncaster train station rather than a closer station, because the closer station is a bit more remote. And what tends to happen, I've had this happen before, is what happens is you naturally come to the Doncaster station, then you need to get that connection to the more remote station where I will be parked, and it'll be, oh, sorry, staffing issues, we've cancelled the service. And then I'm stranded in Doncaster with my car somewhere else, right? So if the government stopped trains being cancelled due to penny pinching, which they call staffing issues, not staffing issues because you're not hiring enough staff, that would be noticed by commuters. Next, increasing the age at which people can buy cigarettes. That's a Conservative policy, which they just didn't finish off. It would be very cheeky for Labour to even try to claim credit for that. I also don't see how non-smokers, who would be the ones most supportive, would even notice without being told. Banning no-fault evictions, that will be noticed. That will be noticed by those affected. The Renters' Rights Bill actually contains lots of other benefits to renters as well as some benefits to landlords who have to deal with actual crap tenants as well. That one will be noticed by millions of people once it's in place later this year. Again, Labour would get more credit with better comms to get the message out to the wider public. But yeah, this one will be noticed. Restricting advertising of food high in sugar, salt and fat to children. I don't even see how parents would notice that one without it being pointed out. Again, it's an absence of something you may not notice regularly anyway. Next, banning 0 hours contracts. This, along with all the other strong rights for workers and unions in the Employment Rights Bill, that will be noticed. Millions of people. It's Labour's biggest gun against Reform UK, I would say. And ironically, might even come in useful against the Reform UK councils, which are now threatening job losses. These policies are very popular, especially with Labour's core vote. And it could, if Reform UK, they're threatening job losses in councils on for spurious reasons. This legislation could actually create a bit of a battleground, a huge wedge issue between Labour and Reform UK for those working class votes. Impossible not to notice, and very popular with Labour's core vote in particular. And these laws will be passed later this year. Next one is removing hereditary peers from the House of Lords. People will never notice that, will they? Of course, that's not going to impact their everyday lives. Move on. Reforming planning restrictions on infrastructure and home building. Again, it would be way better to sell this to the public with a good comms strategy. In the absence of that, where it creates jobs or where it makes access to decent housing better, it will be noticed. There might be a question about whether people will draw the link between the benefit and government policy. Because some things happen in your life that make your life better, and it's not all down to the government. So for the government to get credit, it's not enough for people to feel the benefit. They have to realise it's because of government policy. And when they see these things thrown up, they will look like private investment, because they will be private investment. They won't necessarily appreciate that they're popping up more quickly and more regularly because of Labour making the planning process easier. Removing the exemption for VAT on private school fees. Now, thankfully, the Tory media are actually reminding people about that one on a regular basis. So perhaps their comms failure isn't a problem here. I'd be interested to know how many people realise this has already been done. It does, after all, represent, in a small way, wealthier people paying more of their share of taxes. Finally, establishing an independent football regulator was not enthusiastically endorsed. It was the only one of the King's Speech policies that were polled not to have much more support than opposition. The reverse, actually. Seems to be unpopular, if anything. So probably better that Labour are not doing a good job of communicating that one either. So of the 15 policies polled, 14 of them are popular, some of them wildly popular. So Labour should want the public to know about them. Of those 14, I would say 3 of them will definitely be noticed by millions of voters. And I think those 3 are also important ones, like high up on people's list of reasons to vote for someone. 4 of them will not have enough of an impact on people's lives to be noted without pointing it out. I think 2 of them will be noticeable in parts of the country where they're providing jobs. And I think the rest, it will depend on media reporting if Labour don't bother telling the public themselves. So Labour are legislating for a lot of popular policies right now. And remember, this is just the first tranche of legislation. There's more to come. I mean, later on, they've already hinted that by the end of this year, they'll be on to dropping the voting age to 16 and so on. So there's no need for Labour to panic. There's a lot of stuff coming online that's popular, but only so many of them will be obvious once they're in place. They really would make their lives a lot easier if they would just take the step of using social media to communicate in an engaging way directly with the public on a regular basis. Not just trying to turn it on at election time and even then getting it wrong. Not hiring people who are still using fax machines. You know, get people who understand how it works, get it moving. But anyway, there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.